Check. Is this microphone on, Ken?
It seems to be.
Okay. Good. Hey, welcome to Questions You Never Thought You Could Ask in Church. Today we have two special guests with us, and one of our special guests has left for unknown reasons or reasons that we're not going to talk about right now, but just know that we're praying for you. Yes. So anyway, we have Gwen Johnson, our Next Gen Director at Fellowship of Faith, and then we have Barbie Wells, who, what's your title, Barbie?
Let's make up a title. Let's make up a title for her.
Playing the part of Dave today.
Wife and biggest fan of me.
There you go.
Hey.
Probably more to her than that, I would imagine. So
I think I saw that card in the card aisle at Osco.
Yes. It was at Jewel.
Steve adoration section.
Actually, it was at the dollar store.
Yeah.
No one's paying $6 for that card.
Because it's 2 for $1 at the dollar store. So
it's true.
You are worth 54 cents to me.
But is it still 2 for $1 or is it 2 for $1.25?
Yeah.
Everything's $1.25.
Yeah, they changed that.
Yeah.
So do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself, Barbie? Does she need a microphone?
No, she sounds good.
This is my first time.
Yeah,
it is, and I'm just thrilled to be here. I just got done exercising, and
so it's
I
very
tried to put a little bit of makeup on in the car in the park.
It's important
very premeditated, obviously. Yeah.
So this is it right now. You got my 30-second makeover going on.
That's good. We're here for that.
So are you involved in church work? Like, are you an employee of the church?
I'm not an employee of the church.
What are you an employee of?
Well, I work for a credit data reporting company, one of the major 3, and I actually work in the automotive business unit. So we compile automotive data and provide it to all different kinds of industries, dealerships, original equipment manufacturers, lenders, all kinds of so I won't go into too much about that, but I have actually been at that company for 26 years. Been working from home the majority, so
it's nice.
Yeah, it's really nice.
It's nice for her. It's not nice for me because I get to hear all the conversations.
Yeah.
And when we're talking about automotive data,
it's not very exciting, I bet.
It's so boring.
Yeah. pretty boring.
You can only hear one side of the conversation, and then I think you leave the room.
Yeah,
so
he's done. He's done.
Right.
Not
it's like one side of this conversation is enough. I don't need both.
Yeah, so awesome. Go Barbie. So glad you're here from Kelly. Kelly's sweet. She's pretty awesome. She's on our care team at church. And so like this woman is pretty
Kelly.
awesome. Like the amount of time that she puts into caring for the people of our church
absolutely
is phenomenal. So Kelly, thank you so much for everything that you do.
Yeah.
And I would say, yes, awesome. Go Barbie. And I'm glad she's here too. So,
I'm glad she's here too.
Yes.
Yeah. Personally, I'm pretty glad she's here.
So I guess if you have any questions today that aren't deep theological questions, because none of us are pastors.
Correct. Yeah.
We were looking at, Gwen and I were looking at the kind of the list of questions in our inbox that we have, and I was like, I don't even know what some of these things are.
Those are
I don't
words we
feel
don't
comfortable
know.
providing.
You did read some of them, and here's my answer to probably 98% of those questions that are on there. How can I say this politely?
Politely, that's the key.
You need to get out of your basement and get your nose out of the good book. I mean, it's always great, but at the same time, like, go out and live your faith as well and talk to some people and tell them about
big words we didn't know in them. So.
And several were questions you
probably could ask them in church. Yeah, you're right.
We were on the ones that you can't ask.
Right.
Yes.
You never thought you could.
The ones that are fun.
I do have one for you because when we needed questions for all of us, when we needed questions, my go-to is to go to one of my youth text chains and be like, hey, quick, we need questions. And they often have interesting questions. And this is a good one. Why was God so evident in the Bible and seems so hidden today? Meaning like with callings and things like that. Why was it so obvious then, but then today doesn't feel so obvious? What do we think?
So my initial reaction to that is, and here's where, we in the West are so distracted. Like there's so many things that are going on within our lives from our technology to the busyness of life. We are consumers of of time and energy as far as just doing things all the time.
Yeah.
Whether it's for our kids, whether it's for activities, if we're, it's summertime now. So how do we spend our time? Well, we're probably going out to dinner, by the river or something, or going out on a boat, or Kent likes to golf, right, Kent? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, I do. Enjoy it.
Going on vacations. I mean, all these things, right? So, and none of them are bad.
No.
It's just a matter of so where's your focus at? If you're going to say, well, God was so evident back then, well, they didn't have probably as many activities. I'm sure they were busy,
taking care of the sheep, that kind of stuff. Yeah.
And
it was different.
It was hard work, but it was
different.
You didn't have the leisure.
No.
You couldn't go home and watch Netflix for 5 hours.
Right.
So
you couldn't distract yourself.
You would cook or talk to the family or whatever.
I would imagine 90% of your time was doing burnt offerings.
Pretty much. You look at the detail in those bad boys.
Well,
I know.
And you think about it, I always think about I'm so glad I didn't grow up in that era, because I know me and I know my mouth. And so therefore, if I'm okay, well, I just sinned, so I've got to go, got to get this, whatever animal it is, and do the burnt offering. And then all of a sudden I'm cutting up the meat or whatever, the animal, and then I might cut myself, and then I say a swear
and then
word,
you'd have to
I've
go
got
get
another animal.
go get another ox.
So it's my day is consistently filled with burnt offerings.
Constant,
That's how the profession of butcher came around.
Oh yes.
So that you didn't have to worry.
That's why butchers, when they first were there during those times, they were mutes.
That's right.
So they couldn't swear.
Couldn't swear again.
And have to get more
That's
animals.
not true.
We're making stuff up now.
Yeah.
What was the question again?
All right, so
I'm trying to remember.
Why was God so evident in the Bible and seems so hidden today? And I think, we're coming off a mission trip. This is my mission trip group chat. We were in East St. Louis last week, and all of these kids had time to do listening prayer every day. Like, you're talking about distractions. I think you're dead right.
What that is.
Right. So listening prayer is when we spend probably an hour in nature, quiet, not talking. Bibles, journals, they can do what they want. They can walk around, they can just sit by themselves, they can listen to music if that helps them, but it's not social time. It's time to connect with God, because we are so distracted and we don't have that time. And so we're coming off of that. And I think that when they look at the Bible and they see God, the voice of God coming down and calling someone, which happens a lot, but then they might be feeling like the beginnings of callings in their life, but it doesn't feel so obvious.
Just blatant.
Yeah, it feels so much more hidden. And I think that the truth is it probably felt a little bit hidden then for a lot of people too. It seems obvious to us now reading the Bible, but at the time, my guess is it didn't feel so obvious to them either.
Well, and looking at the Bible, I mean, the book of the Bible is 6,000 years of time,
right?
Or so, roughly. So you're looking at that, and there's how many instances within that of God directly communicating with someone or doing this direct sign.
But it's over this many years, right? Yeah.
50, 100,
Yeah.
How many times did they hear the voice of God?
Very rarely,
If you think that is going to be you, what are the odds of that? It's pretty small.
Also, you might not want it to be. truthfully, those people that were getting those, getting those, very big callings, that was some scary stuff. It wasn't easy. It was hard.
You guys just gave me a great idea, too. And that is, in our neighborhood, to, just get one of our the bushes in the front yard and just light the thing on fire.
Burning
and then
bush.
Put a lawn chair there and be like, well, I'm talking to God.
Talking to God. We're busy. So
TikTok.
TikTok,
yeah. I was going to say too, though, back in the days when the Bible was being written, it was formally documented. You know, who's to say that God isn't evident now?
Exactly.
It's just there's nobody writing an extension to the Bible documenting all of these different instances, and it doesn't seem maybe as real because it's not just, like I said, formally documented.
You're right. I'm sure you're right. I think it does happen.
And I think there's a skepticism today too. At least I have that personally when I hear a story of this person, died, was pronounced dead, and then came back to life, or they drowned and they saw Jesus and then they came back.
Yeah.
I always go, did they really?
Is that real? Yeah. We do have.
I don't know if I believe that.
You're
So
right.
it's maybe it is happening. We just don't see it.
Yeah.
We're not believing it.
Or you're not looking for it.
You're not looking for it, sure.
Absolutely, yeah.
And I don't think we do a really good job in our culture of sharing our stories. So I think that, and maybe this is the answer, go find some people and actually ask them, have you heard from God in your life? How did you get your calling? Because when you start finding people's stories, you'll find he's absolutely still calling people. And it's not always when you're young. Like I know some people get callings much older in life that they feel like God has changed them. And you hear their stories and they're very real and sometimes very like spectacular. But we just don't talk about them. We don't share.
Well, and I think too, yes, Ken.
Well, the Bible as well as a highlight film, perhaps, right?
Right.
So this is what we choose to tap into and go, whoa, here's Sports Center. This is Bible Center.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So there were millions of people back then too who probably walked around saying the same, asking
Exactly.
that same
Not
question.
evidence. Not
But it's alive in what we read because it's a highlight film.
Yeah.
Yeah,
You're right.
there's probably 10,000 basketball games getting played every day,
Right?
And we see the highlights from 2 of them.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
The big events, something
Exactly.
major that happened.
NBA still a thing?
I think so.
Is it still going? The finals were going for a while.
Yeah.
Yay, sports ball.
Celtics.
Yeah.
Celtics, Golden State. I think Golden State won it.
Yeah, they
Good
did.
for them.
Terrific. Terrific. And
Yeah.
confetti falls down.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then we move on to the next one.
That's right. And Tina says also how many people in Bible didn't get a big God story.
Yeah, they didn't.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. Or they were witnesses to a big
Mhm.
God story, but they themselves didn't, they might have known someone, but they weren't like the main character.
Well, and I think it's amazing how many, even with, studying the Bible and being, a Christian for 31 years, how many stories I don't know
Oh, yeah.
that are in the Bible
You go
that
back and you're
are
like,
documented,
oh,
and you're like,
yeah.
Why didn't I hear
That's
about
brand new
this?
information. Yeah, it's true. Like I think we have the highlight reel even more precise, the Sunday school highlight reel, where you get like the same basic
Mhm.
stories, and then about Noah's Ark and about David and Goliath, but then there are so many more hidden stories in there. Yeah.
I think to Ken's point, I think we become numb in the surroundings that we're in.
Yeah.
Meaning that we just get comfortable. We aren't necessarily looking for those things. I know when Andrew and I and Barbie have gone to Uganda, and so it's like there. I think part of it partly is because we're looking for God to be working there, because there needs to be work that is going on there.
Yeah.
But I always, when people ask me about it, I'm always like, it's really cool to see God working there, because it's like a pop-up book, where you're seeing him in all these different cases and instances working. And it's like, well, but when I get back to the States, I'm not seeing that. Well, I'm probably not looking for it either,
exactly.
So
Yeah.
Do you see that in your
For
mission
sure,
trips,
for
too?
sure,
Like,
yeah.
I'm listening. I'm here.
Because we're dedicating
yeah.
time for that.
Right.
Yeah. And being more aware. And you're right. And then you come back and it's back to normal,
Mhm.
normal life. And it's a lot harder. Yeah.
Yeah, and I found I more notice God working in my life when I'm looking back at my life.
Yeah.
Rather
for sure.
than in the moment. Like it's easy to look back and go, oh, I saw how God was working over the last 3 years.
Yeah.
Because of how I ended up where I am now. But it's like,
In
in the moment,
yeah.
you're like calling out to God,
Where
like,
are you?
where are you?
Yeah.
What's going on?
Yeah.
And he's like, I'm
It's true.
right here doing this stuff, but it takes some time.
It
So,
does.
Yeah.
It's true.
um,
So, go ahead.
well, do you have something on that topic? Or
I
gonna
was
jump to a new one.
I was just going to ask you guys to share your calling. Like, since we don't share stories, like when did you feel called, Steve, to do worship leading? When did you feel called to do Hope Center stuff? When did you feel called to work at a church? I think it'd be interesting to hear.
Go ahead,
Wants to
Andrew.
go
Who's
first.
going?
I would say I didn't.
Yeah.
Like I didn't feel a call to it. And that was something that even as I was going through college, I said I would never work at a church.
Mhm.
I didn't want to work at a church. I didn't want to be either a part of the politics or be responsible for other people's faiths or anything like that. I didn't want that responsibility of it. But I mean, that's how God works, it seems.
Yeah.
He takes people who that's the thing they don't want to be doing and goes, okay, but you'd be good for this.
Yeah.
And like, I know that this is going to work out well and this is going to be good for you. So it was kind of through just pure happenstance that I went from, I don't want to work at a church ever to now I'm a full-time staff.
Yeah.
And it wasn't something that I was seeking out. It wasn't anything that I wanted or thought even was necessary really.
Yeah.
And God has a way of accomplishing what he wants to accomplish, regardless of what we think or feel about it.
So it wasn't like a major like lightning strike moment of this is my calling. It was more gradual. And I think for a lot of people, that is how it is. Like just one thing leads to another thing leads to another thing. And suddenly you look around and you're like, oh, here I am
And
in
then
my calling.
Well, and
you
then
know?
once you look back at it, you're like, oh, I see how all of these steps or different jobs that I have or class that I took or jobs I had in college I see how all of that was leading me to this moment in time.
Right.
But you never see that in the moment. You're like, this is just another job or another
Right.
thing or another lesson I'm learning.
Yeah.
But how is it going to apply later in your life? I think it's cool because God sees that whole timeline.
Right.
He's not working necessarily on the then and now. He's working on his goals in the long run.
Yeah. I like that.
Which is very cool.
Kelly says to recognize God's work in your past definitely builds our hope and strengthen Him in our future.
Yeah, that's what you were basically what you're saying,
Yeah,
Andrew. I love that.
great
Yeah.
comment.
Yeah.
Mhm.
All right, how about one of you
So
two?
what's your callings?
You got a calling, Barbie?
Yeah, she does.
Mine wasn't like really definitive like you, Andrew, but so for the Hope Center, I know nothing about baby homes. I know nothing about Uganda. I've never been to Africa. I know nothing about fundraising. I know nothing about any of it. And I saw a picture on Facebook, a friend that I used to go to school with, linked up with her, asked, what are you doing? What's going on? She told me, just little by little, I felt like God was kind of chipping away at like, okay, it wasn't just like boom and all of a sudden. However, there was a moment after we donated, then we sponsored a child, then we sponsored another one, then we agreed to be on the board of directors. And that's when I think it was once we decided to be on the board of directors that we both were like, wow, this is a big responsibility. This is a big thing. And are we going to do this? I mean, it was the turning point. Like, okay, this right here, there's a fork in the road.
Yeah.
Are we going to say yes to God and go along with what He wants? Because I really felt like it was a calling. Or are we going to boom, shoot off and do our own thing and say no?
Well, and we do it because it's so fun.
And easy, it's not stressful.
easy.
Not at all stressful,
No,
I'm
there's-
sure.
There's no
Yeah.
roadblocks that the devil puts in your way and taints people and like situations and
Yeah,
so
ministry is not easy, that's
it's
for
not.
sure.
It's not.
Well, I think just as we can look back or sometimes not see God working in the moment, I think sometimes like we're not looking for God, but it seems like we are looking for the bad. We are looking for the ways that
It's
the devil's making
not
our life
happening.
hard.
Yeah,
or those,
yeah.
It's like
I
we
can't
focus so
do
much on
it.
that because
Yeah.
it's easier. It's fun to
Yeah.
complain.
Oh, of
Yeah.
course it is.
And that's sometimes easier to not want to do the hard thing that God is calling you to.
for sure. And the other thing that I hear in both of your stories is that I think is biblically backed up over and over again is like, I'm not prepared for this. Like, it's not like you were the expert. And so therefore, you know what I mean?
Oh my
God
gosh.
doesn't look for people who have it all together and know everything that they're going to do. He looks for the yes, like that willingness to learn, the willingness to try, the willingness to grow.
Like slow of
True.
speech and slow of tongue.
Right.
Now you're going to be the leader of the
Exactly.
nation Israel.
Exactly.
What?
And that's
But I
what
can't.
I can't talk. Yeah. And that's what happened over and over. So you're like, I don't know anything about any of these things.
Right.
And then I'm being called to this. Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah.
How about
Tell
you?
us. No, you go first.
Me.
Yeah.
Save the best for last.
Yeah, of course. Of course. Gotta stay straight. I was
If we
working
have time.
only if we get to it.
Yes.
Only if we get to it. I was working in church for a while and had a bad church situation and left. And I vowed at that point that I would, one, never work in a church again, and vowed I would never do children's ministry. Never, ever, ever. And what this is a lesson, kids. If you tell God that you're never going to do something, it's almost a guarantee that He will require you to do that. So, and so for me, it was my calling took time because I had to heal, and like God knew that and gave me the time that I needed to heal. And then, and even before I left that church, I was at a conference. This is for being called to youth ministry in particular. And I was there as the board of the Christian education chair, right? So I went to this conference as the chairperson, and I was there with the children's ministry director from the church at the time. And we would go to sessions, and in every session they would say, what are you here for? Are you a youth director? Are you a children's director? They would list things. And every single session, I swear I did not do it intentionally. They would say youth director and I'd raise my hand. And the person I was with thought it was funny. And it wasn't funny at all because I wasn't doing it on purpose. And it was like literally God using my body to be like, do you hear me? I am speaking to you. Stop being dumb. That's what it was. And every time I was like, why am I raising my hand? Yes, it was so dumb. And I left that conference and came home and I said to Tim, like, I think I'm supposed to do youth ministry. He's like, you think? Like, it was everyone else around me was like, no, duh. And I had to have that like stupid of an experience
Mm.
to know that I had to do it. And that meant leaving our church. So at that time, it wasn't just, I want to go into youth ministry. It's like, well, now we have to find a whole new community, a whole new church, because I couldn't do it at the church I was at. So it was a major upheaval. So the calling was hard. Like, I think sometimes
sure.
you think a calling is going to be this magnificent moment, and then everything just goes
Falls
right
into
and right falls into
Just-
place, and that's
yeah.
not how it is. There's
Mhm.
healing that has to happen, and there is hurt, and there is hard times, and it's persevering through that, I think,
Mhm.
which isn't easy.
Well,
So
and as someone described it, being called into ministry, they said, and this is the day that my life went to crap.
yeah.
The day that they were called into
That-
full-time ministry, and that was their reaction.
That was
to
Ben
it.
Gadini, for the record.
Yeah. I didn't know if we wanted that out there.
Let's go. I'm putting it out there. That's what he said. That my day my life
Who
went
is
to
now
crap.
doing what?
Going to be a pastor.
Uh-huh.
He's going to school to be a
Going to be a
pastor. But
pastor.
that's how he
Yes.
describes it. The day his life went to
And,
crap.
and I have so many stories of friends that had that
Feel
happen
that.
too. They're like,
yeah.
I'm in church, we're kicking and screaming.
Yeah.
Like, God,
It's because God's
drug
forcing
me
me.
into
Yeah.
this.
yeah.
Yeah.
It's true. And
I
it's
think
that
that's
it's that yes, even when you don't want to say it. And
Yeah.
it's a
Yeah.
small yes sometimes, because it's all you can manage at the time. Yeah.
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 Yeah. So for me, I remember going. Did you guys ever have to do sermon notes?
Oh yeah, for confirmation.
Hated them.
Yeah, so dumb.
So,
So glad Dave doesn't require
but
that.
see, my mom's pretty awesome. Like she's such a sweet person. I mean, if there's anybody that represents Christ, it's her. And Barbie Lee, I mean, she'll vouch for that.
Oh yeah.
But that's why I'm with Barbie too, because she reminds me a lot of my mom. So
Yeah.
Aw.
very sweet. But anyway, I say that because she's sitting to my left.
I say, I've heard the things you've said when she's not
Wait a
here.
second here. You just said the other day. Now, so I remember going through the sermon notes and listening to the sermon. I always enjoyed them, and I got a lot out of them. I hated writing them, and I still
Yeah.
do to this day. I can't stand taking something that I've heard and then writing something about it. I'm not a good writer. I just, and maybe I am a decent writer. I just don't want to take the time to do it.
You don't like it, yeah.
So anyway, so our pastor was like, well, you should really think about going into the ministry. You know, you have a good grasp of this. I'm like, well, those are my mom's notes.
You're like, I didn't write this.
But-
She would be really good in the ministry.
But sure, let's go take a tour, right? So I was going to go to Concordia Seward, and they don't have soccer scholarships or
They
athletic
didn't.
They
scholarships.
can't, yeah.
Right.
Because they're not.
But that's what they were going to pay part of my tuition for, is if I played soccer.
It's a presidential
Right,
scholarship.
right. But then, things took a turn, and, I was doing some nasty stuff and treating people horribly and doing a lot of drugs and drinking and other stuff that probably, well, I know we don't have ratings on this show, but we'll keep
It'll
it
push us
clean.
over.
PG-13, maybe R.
So anyway, that didn't go. And then skip forward a little bit. Barbie and I met through a secular band, a rock and roll band. And she auditioned me for drums, and I was like, okay, well, I'll play, but I'm going to take this thing over too, so.
Why does that not surprise me at all, Steve?
I didn't know about the house tape.
I'm gonna be in charge.
The hostile
Well, like I'm going to
I
tell you
would've
about
said,
it.
You're
Yeah.
out. No.
You didn't lead with
Yeah.
that.
I'm not
Yeah.
going to tell you about
This is
that.
my band.
Right. You're going to listen to everything I say. No, but anyway, so through a series of unfortunate events, our lead singer, who Barbie went to college with for voice and music and whatnot, she was killed in a car accident, and then and we had some things that were just weird things that happened. We flew out to New York, and we're supposed to do a tour out there, and the manager who was represented us, like, we went to the bar that night and just we drank way too much, and so turns out this guy wanted to go to the beach that night, and so we're like, okay, well, I guess go to the beach. And so he's got alopecia, which is where you can't grow any hair on your body.
Yeah.
So imagine me with no hair, because that's kind of what he looked like, just
Yeah,
bald,
and He's really white.
super,
Complected, too.
Yeah.
super attractive guy,
Don't make a G.I. Jane joke.
No, I'm not. But anyway, he dives into the ocean, and where is he? Can't find him. It's been 20 minutes. Well, Diane, she calls the shore patrol. They come down, they get the spotlight out, and his body had washed up.
Oh my
about 50
gosh.
yards down the beach. Well, when he dove in, he broke his neck,
Oh,
so he was
no.
paralyzed. But he knew enough to when to hold his breath when the waves were coming in and whatnot. And so they took him out. Cops were interviewing us and whatnot. His family actually took us out to a very fancy restaurant because they were so thankful that it was us there. Because if it would have been his friends, they would have all left because he's kind of a prankster. Hold on, my daughter's calling me right now.
Oh.
On the phone.
It's just a whole family podcast.
Yeah.
Live on the air.
So anyway, he ends up. That turned out to be a good story. He met someone in rehab, when he's now a paraplegic, not a quadriplegic, but he lived and met his wife.
Which is miraculous, really.
Yeah, and met his wife there in rehab and everything. So, that turned out well. But again, it just didn't seem like this is where we were
needed to be.
Yeah.
Exactly. And so we stopped that band. I continued with music and whatnot. And that's where Andrew, Dave Kimbrough, that's where he came into the mix and whatnot. And then I started singing in that band and got a drummer for us. And so then we were getting our taxes done. And our tax person told, she knew we were musicians, whatnot. She's like, you should try Room 211, which was a service that was started at our old church. And it was basically Acts 2 church, you're hearing the gospel and you're in a language that you understand and whatnot. And so we started going to that service. We loved the service. I hated the music. It's just like, and to this day, I don't know if it was the music itself or just where I was at.
Yeah.
I would imagine it was a little bit of both.
Probably. And
so, but the pastor was asking for a drummer, and I'm like, I'm not doing this.
I don't want to.
I'll go here. It was for the kids because our kids need to know who Jesus is.
For the kids, yeah.
And so 3 weeks go by, he keeps asking, and Barbie's just like, just do it. Help these people. And I'm like, fine. So I
hostile takeover.
Volunteer.
Yeah.
Well, not yet. That was a slower takeover.
Again, the drummers are always trying to take over. You better watch your back, Steve.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, I know.
I'm drumming this week.
I
so.
know you are.
There it is. Hostile
We got a
takeover.
new song too. So
Great.
anyway, so then that led into playing drums, with the band and whatnot, and then our singer and Jason Phelps. Remember Jason Phelps? No? Okay. Well, he took a call. He was the worship guy, and I think because that wasn't like a called position at that church, he became a DCE or a SMP program, and then moved down to Texas. And so I was asked, hey, do you want to try singing? And I'm like, no, because I'm comfortable behind the drums. As you know, like that's your
protection.
That's your shield.
Safe zone.
You don't have to deal with anyone. You don't have to interact with anyone. And I'd never done that before, really. So then I sang "Like a Rose" by Michael W. Smith.
No.
You did not.
I
I would pay to
I
hear
did.
that recording.
That was my first song that I sang in church.
Like a rose.
Were you wearing a
Like a
Motley
rose.
Crue t-shirt while you were
Yes.
singing it?
Yes, that's exactly what I did.
What's the name of that song?
Yeah, it was kind of like, you took the fall and thought,
Above
above all.
Above all,
yeah.
yes. Oh
Which-
my gosh.
Ugh, you want
Clearly,
something?
it stuck with us. So.
Yeah, we know it.
Well, so you're right. Okay, back in the day, probably a decent song, but not well.
It's not your
not
style.
your style,
That's
yeah.
for
It's not
sure.
me.
It's
It's
not
not me.
you.
And so anyway, then after that, it was like, well, why don't you continue to do this until we find someone? Well, then that led into me continuing,
Yeah.
and here we are, 17.
So are you
years
still
later.
the interim worship director?
Yes.
That's what it feels
Yes,
like.
on paper there.
I think I'm still the interim.
I think they still think I'm
next gen
there.
director.
Their bookkeeping wasn't very good. In fact, I didn't even find out I had a pension until I came here.
Oh, you're like, oh,
I'm like,
that's
interesting.
All right.
Fantastic.
Good.
I think that's a couple questions that you didn't ask. I
Yeah.
don't know.
Thank you, HR,
Yeah.
for a mega church.
Right.
Anyway,
Oh my
yeah. So
gosh.
that's that. I mean, it really is. It's like I just remember the time when you say like, what was the moment? And I think the moment was if you can imagine yourself standing on a stage, scared to death, and then taking that leap of just now imagine a cliff of like, okay, I'm gonna just take the step off the cliff, and I'm really
Trust,
hoping that
yeah.
God has this. You
Yeah.
know, so.
Again, it's not. I hope everyone's hearing this. It's when we're in callings, it's not out of our strength. It's always out of our I don't want to weakness. Like I'm not going to be good at this. I'm worried.
Well,
I
the
think
devil
that's how
plays
God
with your
works.
insecurities
For
so
sure.
much,
For sure. But also, if we're weak, we know that when things are going okay, God, it's God's strength and not our own too. Like it's.
And I think
trusting
in
Him.
those insecurities are the things that devil picks at.
Yeah.
Those are the things that God uses then.
Yeah.
It's like those are it's not your strengths or your given things, but it's the things that you wrestle with because
Yeah.
that brings an authenticity to it to the people that you're leading or interacting with.
Yeah.
And I like
Tent.
there was a point over here
Sorry.
Then it'll be Ken's
about
turn.
that.
Yeah.
Tina said you
Yeah.
might go kicking and screaming, but God is faithful and gives you joy when you follow Him.
Yep.
I think that's good too,
It's
because
true.
kind of all of us had that. I wasn't prepared for this. I didn't necessarily want to do this. And sometimes if you stop the story there, then it's like, well, what's
What
the point of
happened?
this?
Yeah,
And
why
it's
are
like,
we doing it?
No,
Yeah.
it clearly has turned out well, and
Yeah.
God has been faithful in that. And there is fulfillment and joy in it.
For sure.
And welcome Andrew Kiza. Andrew's in Uganda.
Uganda.
And he says what causes familiarity and what may be the outcomes basically in a church. Not exactly sure you guys understand that or
What
not.
causes
That was
familiarity?
10 minutes ago.
Oh, it was?
that
Oh.
Okay, so it could have been something
I'm like,
completely
I don't
irrelevant.
know.
I think we were talking about our callings at that
So, okay,
Okay.
good. You have
And I
something
think the
you were
like
raising
the
your hand.
comfortability, like when we're saying like we get comfortable with
Yeah.
how we are,
Yeah.
if we're not
Oh,
looking
yeah.
for
Okay.
God.
Yeah.
in
Yeah,
any
yeah.
circumstance.
Oh, okay.
That makes sense,
Because
yeah.
we're comfortable.
Makes total
and
sense.
familiar with
Uh-huh.
it.
Yeah, just wanted to give a shout out, say thanks for listening to 21.6 Net. This is Questions You Never Thought You Could Ask in Church, live every Wednesday at 12:30 Central. If you've got questions that you never thought you could ask in church, go ahead, text them into 815-314-0363. Of course, you can do that 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Go out, like, follow, subscribe to all of our good stuff out there at Fellowship of Faith, YouTube, Facebook, TikTok. I don't know if you're on TikTok or not. But,
I don't
Inst-
think we're on
Inst-
TikTok.
Not yet. Not yet.
Instagram, all those good things. Right here, 21.6 The Net. We do the hour of worship on Sundays at 10. It also runs live. Go out to FOF Plus right there. We've got it up on the screen. Just a lot of good things to connect and, ask those questions or find answers to some of those questions as well, which is fantastic. Which I do have a question. And the question I have is, why is Christians, right, or church goers, I could say, because you don't necessarily have to be a Christian to be a church goer, do we say, the devil really picks at you? Why do we give the devil so much power? Don't you think it's God who challenges you and makes you uncomfortable to grow? But we're really quick to go, well, the devil is always picks at you, when God's a beautiful person, the being, I guess, not person, right? But I would guess that as a parent, I push my children certain ways, poke at them, and make them uncomfortable to grow. So,
Yeah.
so why do we all of a sudden go, oh, it's the devil?
See,
Yeah.
just like
Yeah.
you're doing right now
Yeah,
to us.
Yeah.
exactly. That's all.
Feel,
No,
the,
I-
feel
yeah.
the divide here.
Yeah.
Ken.
Hey.
I think it goes both. I think it goes both ways, though. Truthfully, like I think God does absolutely do that,
Mhm.
and it's silly for us to think He wouldn't. You're right. As a parent, I know I do that because that's what to make our kids better, right?
Mhm.
To help them be better people. But I do think that sometimes, and we were talking about Screw Tape Letters last week. If you haven't read it, please do. It's by C.S. Lewis. It's phenomenal. And the concept of it is it's a demon writing to an apprentice demon, basically about how to distract Christians
Manipulate.
and manipulate, right? And it takes place in like World War I England, so it's an interesting setting. But his thing is always the best place that you can have a Christian is apathetic. So it wouldn't be the picking at, it would really be the get them to a point of apathy where they just don't care.
And just let 'em go.
They sit in their church on Sunday mornings for an hour, check it off the list and leave, and it doesn't have anything
Right.
to do with their lives, because then they're not doing anything, and it's great from a demonic
Right.
perspective. And I think you're right that sometimes we attribute it to that, and it's maybe a little misguided. But I think that when you're in high spiritual warfare areas, like on mission trips, for example, when you're in
Mhm.
Uganda, I'm sure when we were in East St. Louis,
Mhm.
you can literally feel the spiritual warfare. So to
Yeah.
deny that it's happening at all, which I think is another extreme of that, where people are like, I don't really think that that's even real. And then you're in that moment and you're like, oh no, this is very
It's
real. Yeah.
Mhm.
So we're too quick to blame it maybe, but
Right.
also we should acknowledge that it is very real and possible too.
Well, and I think too, Kent, to your point, if you are a Christian, then maybe you should maybe do the due diligence of praying
Yeah.
and asking for discernment
Seeking
to know
God. Yeah.
Mhm.
which is which and where is this coming from. A little reflection.
Yeah, you're right.
It's a very good Dave answer.
That is a good Dave. Look at
It's
you.
almost like
Well,
he's-
I was going to be a
Stepping in.
pastor,
Yeah.
He had good
From your
notes.
mom's sermon
but I
notes.
cheated on the notes.
Cheated on the
So-
entry
That's
exam.
what's happening.
Oh, that's good. Earlier, Kelly asked a question
Yeah.
here.
Yes, that's what I wanted to get to.
How do you each keep your prayers fresh, so
Ah.
you're not praying same prayer
Yeah.
over and over and over
Yeah, that's a
Ooh,
good
Can I
question.
give a Dave answer?
and over?
Please do.
I don't.
There you go.
Ooh.
Yeah, that seems like something he would do.
It's absolutely what he'd say. And then he'd move on to the next question.
Actually-
And now Andrew's off to seminary.
Yeah.
I'm done. That was the whole.
Actually,
Follow
actually,
his
say
scale
great
there.
question. Thanks for asking.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I
great
do.
question. That is how he starts. Great question. Thanks for asking.
Yeah. No, I absolutely think it's. I think it's some of both. Sometimes it is fresh. Sometimes it's something new. But I also have, things in my life that I prayed for 10 years
Over and
about,
over, yeah.
over and over and over. Whether it's something you're trying to get out of, or a situation, or discernment, or whatever. There are things that it feels like you're like, why am I always having to pray about this?
Yeah.
But I think that's where persistence comes in, and
Yeah.
maybe you're either God is saying not now, or He's saying no, and
Yeah.
that's something for us to try to deal with.
And I
wrestle
think
with.
that's, if you're talking about your prayer life in general, which I think we all struggle with this too, where it feels monotonous or like it's the same. Trying different spiritual practices is a beautiful way to break out of that monotony, whether it's journaling your prayer instead of just saying it out loud, or I don't know around here, but walking a labyrinth, or, finding some different way to pray. I know when Dave, this past week on Sunday morning, Dave asked the leaders before church to pray the Acts model, which was a different way. We haven't prayed like that before church. I like when we have something new like that. And the Acts model is adoration, confession, thanksgiving, and then supplication, which is like requests. So he had a group praying adoration, a group praying confession, a group. So it's just a different way to pray. And you might end up praying the same things you would have otherwise, but it's thinking through them differently. And there's so many things like that. And listening prayer is another great one, where you just go and be quiet and you don't say anything and you listen instead. And that's a different way to pray. So, but I think everyone struggles with the monotony of like getting in a routine, and a routine is good, but then it also just becomes the
Becomes a
same.
routine.
Yeah.
This happened to me last night. So like, I'm not sleeping. And
Well, there's a
No
shocker.
one's sleeping.
so Barbie had been
that's
gone like the 2 nights prior to. Her and Maya always go down to Kansas City and go to Worlds of Fun, and that's their trip. And I get some time just to do whatever I want to do, which is nice. But anyway, so we have this cat, right? We have this kitten, and
This cat.
usually the cat is put away at night. Like that's what her routine was, is that, ever since she's been a kitten, we didn't want her destroying the house and whatnot. So we had put her in this little thing, and that still to this day. And she's how old? 9 months probably now. So more of a cat than a kitten, but has tendencies. And so anyway, the cat while she was gone, the cat was fine. I let her out all night. She didn't bother me. Last night, first night she's home, the cat's in our bedroom and like destroying the place. And I'm like, well,
Up on our headboard.
So behaved for you.
behave for me, but Barbie's more of a friend, and a lover of animals than I am.
That's that sweet
So
part.
there's a
that's
healthy,
sweet.
there's a healthy fear.
Maybe
of
that
you.
cat felt the love when she came
I'm
home.
sure. And that cat pro was probably like, see what I did here?
That's right.
Don't challenge me, Steve.
That's right.
I own her.
Oh my
Right.
gosh.
So
How's this
anyway,
relate to praying?
Yeah.
because
I'm
I'm
trying
getting
to-
to that.
Okay.
I'm getting to that. Cat's rummaging around at 2:30 in the morning, and I'm still awake.
Yeah.
And so, of course, I'm like, well, I'm gonna turn everything off. I'm gonna just pray. And Kelly, to your point, like I'm going through all the things that, like, I'm thankful for my wife. I'm thankful for my kids. Please help them in these ways. Pray for my family back home in Nebraska. Pray for the hopes in our event. Like the laundry list of things that are just popping into my head,
Yeah.
right? But at one point, I'm just like, okay, I'm ready for bed now. And all the time, I say to myself, like, well, God, He already knows anyway. So night, night. Like I'm not going to continue down that, because I could pray for hours and hours and hours, and it's like, or asking for things, or thanking Him for things, and protection over things, and keeping people well, and all these different things. And it's like, okay, you already know this, you know what's in my heart, what's in my mind. So I'm just going to shut up now and go to bed.
Yeah.
So,
Did it work?
yeah, until 3,
2:30 to 3.
when Barbie the cat jumped up on her headboard, and then I see her get up and like grab the cat, and the cat's like, meow, like, well, what do you mean I got to go to bed,
God.
And so I saw that happen, and then I'm like, okay, it's just go to sleep.
Oh my
So,
gosh.
I have to force myself. My mind just goes, and then I ramble all day like I'm doing now.
I love that.
Things
It's
are
a good
just,
journey for you.
it's fun.
I have to excuse myself.
Oh, yes.
I have to go pick
Go
up
pick
our
up
Hey,
my,
real
daughter.
quick before you do that, because I know your grandma listens to this religiously every time.
I
You
love
just want to
that.
say
Yes.
hi and I love you.
Hi, Grams. I love you.
I love that so much.
That's
That's
awesome.
beautiful and pure right there.
She is 93 years old, lives
Love
on
it.
10
Hey,
acres,
hey.
Love it.
has guineas, chickens, horses, ponies,
What are
Yeah.
dog.
Keeps
that
her young.
She
Like it.
bales
Like chickens?
hay
Chickens.
by
Okay,
herself
like
and
chickens.
throws
Wow.
them.
Okay.
That's pretty
And then
impressive.
At 93.
yesterday, she threw hay bales.
Yeah.
What?
I mean, the big 50,
Yeah.
75 pounders.
So
Oh
for
my
all
gosh.
the kids
Isn't
and
that
youth
crazy?
that are listening out there,
If she can do it, come on.
suck it up. Oh my gosh. Learn
Go
from that
on.
generation.
Go out and work.
Well,
Yeah.
hey, thanks for having
Thanks
me.
for
Awesome.
coming, Barbie.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll see you later.
Barbie Wells, everybody.
Drive safe.
Okay.
Yeah. Woo woo.
All right.
All right.
So another question, staying on the prayer topic, then, do you find time? Do you make time every day? Do you have a specific time like cut out for it? Right. So as a kid, the muscle memory is all right. Now I lay me down to sleep.
Right.
Right. As an adult, do you have it on your calendar, or is it that my prayer time? A lot is I'm driving.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
And just talking with God. So do you guys have a regimented? And is it important to have a regimented time?
So I do think it's important to like at bedtime, for instance, that's when I know that I'm going to pray for sure. But on any given day, there's many conversations that I'm having with God throughout the day.
Mhm.
You know,
Constant,
and-
yeah.
and it's just either questions, that I have for Him, or thoughts, or oh man, sorry about that.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
Oops.
Whoops. My bad.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Jeez.
I think that before a year ago, I would have answered this very differently, which is interesting because a year ago I did a spiritual fitness plan with Dave. And he, for those of you who don't know what that is, he like meets with you, kind of asks you leading questions about your spiritual life and listens and processes it all. So you end up talking about, your history and everything. And then he takes that information and looks for what areas you can improve, like what holes there are, just like a personal trainer would if you went in to get, fit. That's the
Because
same
we all
kind of
have
thing.
blind spots.
Right. We all have blind
Mhm.
spots or we don't have blind spots, but we just blatantly ignore it. Like we know, and that was me. Like
For
I
everything.
knew,
Yeah.
right. And I knew that prayer for me, like I was religious about reading the Bible. I always read the Bible. I was religious about some things, but I just did not have any kind of routine for prayer and wasn't good about putting it in my everyday schedule and everyday life, and had lots of excuses because I think we all can come up with lots of excuses for
And
it.
distractions.
And Dave pushed me on it, and I'm glad he did. And so I ended up buying like a specific prayer journal for me. Writing is everything. Writing helps cement things for me. If I'm just thinking, I get so distracted and it's like I'm all over the place. But if I'm writing, I'm much more focused. And so I just went online and bought a prayer journal that had prompts, like a confession prompt, a Thanksgiving, like gratitude place, a place to write requests, like in it for every day has this. And that was revolutionary for me. I hadn't done that before, and so it was like a new kind of prayer for me. And I am not a person who does it every day. And I'm not a person who has it still like in my schedule, like at this time every morning, I'm getting up and sitting outside. I'm not that person, but 3-4 times a week, I am getting in there and praying. And then if I'm having a bad week, every single time I'm like a mess, emotionally not doing well, I'm like, well, it's been 7 days since I actually sat down and prayed. And I literally feel better when I spend that time. But I think flexibility is key, because if it just becomes like, I have to do it at this time every day, then that's not real or authentic either.
Yeah.
Right.
So
I remember about you talked about scheduling or a habit or a time. Remember about 5 years ago when the Christians, it was cool to do like, well, here's my scripture reading, and here's my coffee cup, and here's my funny little saying on my coffee cup, and they would take a picture of it and put it to social media.
yeah,
And it's like, oh gosh, you're driving me away.
yeah,
Like
that's not real.
I don't want to let that time be between you and God.
Yeah.
Well,
Well, that's biblical. That's like don't go on a street
Right.
corner and loudly
Yeah.
proclaim what you're doing. Like go in the closet and close the door. No one needs to know
And it
what's
doesn't
happening.
mean don't ever talk about it.
No,
Not at
but
all,
it doesn't need
no.
to be that
No.
like, look at me and all that I'm doing. Like,
well,
that's
it's
not
like
the point.
posed, it's like
Yeah, it's
something you're going to
very-
do for a commercial. like,
Yeah.
Yeah.
oh, come over to check out Christianity.
It seems
Yes.
fake.
You could have coffee in the morning and Talk with God.
Coffee
Talk
with
God.
Christ.
Yeah. That's right.
Coffee with the King.
Is that how you pray and talk to God in your radio voice?
Yeah,
Yeah,
I do.
that's what you
It's,
should
Listen up,
do.
God. I got something to tell you. About
next
today.
up, we're going to be praying for Jim.
I love that. I love that.
I want you to narrate the
Yes.
prayers in my head.
Let's
That'd be so
go.
much fun.
Next on WGOD.
That's right.
Hence narrating our prayers
That's right.
now.
Because the as a person, I don't, right? I don't hit my knee, if it's something, but there are times throughout the day, like I say, I spend with God, right?
Yeah.
Or he spends with me, however you want to say it. But then I watch this or listen to this and I go, man, you guys, a couple of hours of praying. Whoa, I wish I was there.
Yeah.
Right. And then I'm like, where that? Can I find 2 hours
Right.
to,
It's the
to
truth.
pray? Right. So there's always that piece of me that admires, hey man. So, I just, next thing one of my old business partners was like that. It's like, I just sat down and 3 hours later,
Yeah,
I'm
right.
like,
What?
Would
Yeah.
you take a nap?
yeah, it was just like, whoa, what an
That's how my
incredible
3
thing.
hour prayers
Right,
go.
right.
Yeah. So I always find it interesting to see if people with strong faith, do I carve it out, put it
Yeah.
on my calendar or
Yeah.
whatever. But I'm very much like you, Gwen. It's like, why do I feel like a pile of,
Yeah, there it is.
there
Yeah.
it is. Yeah. Let me take a little time here to
Yeah.
You want to
recenter.
hear one of the coolest, probably the coolest story about prayer that I've ever heard was, so Christopher Yuan, which I think we talked about him last week as far as him being gay, and what we didn't talk about is that he was actually the top drug dealer in Atlanta, in the Atlanta area, and so got into drugs, of course, and then started dealing, and then became like the king in Atlanta.
Not a pharmaceutical rep.
No, definitely not.
No.
Yeah.
Police busted in. They, got him. He was in prison, and then he found a Bible there on a trash can, and someone even was thrown away. Got it out, started reading scripture, then started going through Moody Bible Institute from prison. And when he gives his talks, one of the coolest things is about his mom. And you'd never hear this until he said it. And I love that because she didn't come out and look what I did. But there was a closet in his parents' house, and she would go in there. The carpet was literally worn down to knee spots of her being on her knees praying. And there was a whole list of sticky notes of like chains and chains and chains of sticky notes of her written down prayers that she would sit there and just pray like feverishly for her son, because she was just that and just to think about that, I like the love that she had for her son is just incredible. And so, but you never hear about that unless he talks about it. And so it's that humbleness to say, look, I don't need to put this out there.
Right.
This is between me and God.
Yeah, it's not for glory.
Not at all. And that's what's cool about it. It's just like,
Wow.
you know what? I don't care who knows. It's God.
Yeah, that's really cool.
Yeah. that
Yeah, and
is-
so prayer is, I think, something that's changed throughout my life, and it's because I didn't think I was praying. Like I didn't think I ever had
there was a
prayer.
Did you
formula.
think it had to be like a fancy prayer, like
or
a church prayer?
even
or-
starting with just like, dear God, like, oh, I'm talking to God now.
Oh.
Like for me, it was like when I'm journaling or when I'm writing something down, that's a conversation between me and God.
Yeah.
But it
yeah.
didn't start with
Didn't
dear
feel
God,
like
and
that,
it didn't
yeah.
end with amen.
Yeah, yeah.
And I never really thought about it until just now in this moment. I'm like, whenever I'm doing that or writing or journaling, every day or a few times a week, like that is how I'm conversing with God. That's how I'm working things out of my brain. That's how I'm listening for what he's doing in my life or trying to see him active in it.
Yeah.
Even though it's just things flowing out of my fingers at my computer. It's like, that is a prayer life and a prayer ritual, even if
Absolutely.
it doesn't, look like it. It's a
Right.
different way of praying. Is just what's going on in my life, and let me either talk about it in my head or talk to God about it, talk to someone about
Yeah.
it, and he's listening,
Yeah.
regardless of if you're directing it to him. And they're like, oh, did he pick up the phone or whatever? It's like you're talking and he's there listening.
So-
He's a part of that.
You're not a parent yet.
Mm-mm.
Someday, maybe not. Who knows what God has in store for you. But as far as the three of us in here that are, would we ever be like, oh, my kids are trying to talk to me again?
Sometimes.
Well, sure, but if it's
it depends on the day.
Not now,
and
Molly.
what it's about.
Right.
but sure, I get that, and I'm sure God feels the same way
Probably,
about some
yeah.
of our prayers. But
This needy David writing another song.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's like, like just that communication, knowing that they value that time and have come to me,
Right.
to
Yeah.
talk about something. That's great. I don't care what it is.
Yeah.
Yeah. In my mind, I'm thinking, oh, geez, here we go again.
Yeah.
But yeah, just that
You are glad that they want to talk to you.
want to talk to you
want
because
to,
they could be talking to a number of other
Yeah.
people that may not lead them in a correct way.
Right.
So
And the older they get, that's for sure true. Like it's when they're young and they have like the 9 bajillion questions and they're talking to you about a game you don't care about and it takes them an hour to tell you something that should have taken them 2 minutes. That's when it's tricky for me.
That's
But
right.
like when they get to be teenage age and they're seeking you out, then it's like very special because that isn't always the case, right? So then it's like, okay, they really do value what I have to say.
and I've raised only girls, so the
Maybe
frequency,
Hashtag.
the amount of words that come out
So many
from a
words.
girl are much more than a
So many
boy,
words.
and so
A good trick that I learned as a parent is when they're
what
rambling.
you have on your head right now.
Yeah.
Big
Yes,
headphones.
is I look at them and go, wait a minute, could you say that again? And then they seem to shorten it up.
They
'cause
do. Yeah. They take this and condense
It's
it.
like,
That's
where
a
you
good
go?
idea.
Instead of going,
Try
come on,
again.
come on.
Land that plane.
TLDR about this.
Yeah, right?
Wait a
Right.
minute, Tina says, yeah, frequently I do say that. Like, oh my gosh, my kids are trying to talk to me again.
Yeah.
And
I know, Tina.
Kelly says, awesome. God just wants our time and conversation, formal prayers if you want, or just heart talk.
Yeah, and that's what I was going to say. Like, I had a moment where I realized, because there's the Bible verse, pray without ceasing. And I remember reading that and being like, what? Like, how can anyone do that? And that's when I put together, like, all the thoughts in my head, they really are prayers.
Mhm.
And that hit me, like, all throughout when you're driving, when you're whatever you're doing, when you have those moments, that's you talking to God. And that changed it for me of like, oh, yeah, that makes a lot more sense.
Because
That's
I do
doing
think
life with
God, that's walking
Yeah.
with him.
walking
Exactly.
with him.
Exactly.
And I think that's where a lot of, probably Christian or non-Christian, I think that there's the idea that, well, in order to worship, you have to be in a church.
yeah, no.
And in order to pray, you have to be in this location, and it's got to
Yeah.
sound like this. And
Yeah.
it's like, no.
It's got to sound like this. Our Father,
Yeah.
who art in heaven.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, immediately your voice, and everything changes.
I love
Yeah.
Your cadence.
congregations that say the Lord's Prayer like the Pledge of Allegiance.
That's how it is. That's how it comes out. You're not wrong.
Our Father. Gonzo asked a question. This is kind of a good question. I don't know if we've got time to answer it. If
Awesome.
not, let's jump on it next week. But Gonzo says, why would God let people go through really hard times if that event causes them to lose faith?
If the event would cause them to lose faith.
Yeah, so that's a good one.
It is a good question. I think this is actually a free will question, and that's the trick of it, right? Because at the end of the day, I mean, God he does know what will happen, but it's still we have choice in it. So
I would love like an example, and the reason I say that is because sometimes when we, I have friends of mine that ask kind of the same question: why does God allow bad things? Well, one, are you a Christian or do you believe in God? For one, like I want to know that.
So Gonzo is
it's Ashton. Hi,
Ashton.
Ashton. It's one of our youth.
Okay.
So what comes to mind, what biblical story comes to mind for me when I'm thinking about this question is, the 40 days and 40 nights out in the wilderness. Hey, why don't you just step off the cliff? God will give you wings. Right. And I think that I don't know why. And I think that's okay not to know why. But if it causes, I don't know if it causes you to lose faith or lose focus at the moment, perhaps,
That's what I was thinking.
which then I relate to losing faith. But in other words, I lose focus and then you again become empathetic or whatever and start going, well, why me? Why me? Poor me, poor me. God, you should have saved me. You pulled me out of the fire or whatever the case may be. When maybe the idea was for you to start questioning or getting closer to God with these upset conversations. I don't know.
That's what I was thinking too. If it's a loss of faith or a loss of trust almost. And I don't think a loss of faith means now I'm an atheist.
Right.
I don't think it's an all or nothing thing. I think it is kind of on that scale of, am I trusting God with my life right now, or do I not know, or am I a little worried, or am I asking these questions? Am I mad about this? The two things don't have to, exist as like antithetical to each other.
And we're always, it's not our spiritual journey isn't like a constant
It's not
increase
binary,
towards
like, I have
going
faith
towards
or I
God.
don't have
Right.
faith.
It's always like this and what we
Yeah.
believe and don't
So
believe.
Gonzo says, my friend turned atheist because he went through a very hard time and lost a lot of faith because of the events. Now, I was listening to, it was a TED talk or something, and the pastor was actually saying, I love atheists.
Yeah.
More than Christians.
Yeah. They're actually thinking.
Because they walk through life without the thought that God's going to bail them out.
Yeah.
Well, why do we think God's going to bail us out?
I don't know.
I mean, I don't know that's biblical, that he's going to, because to your point, you said free will.
Yeah.
Right. So if God's the puppet master, well, then of course, then I would have a problem with it. Then I would doubt if he loves me, if he even is there for me or whatever, but he's not. And so therefore it's a matter of, during those times, although it be hard, I don't know that God caused any of that.
No.
He just decided, or it's free will.
Allowed,
He's allowing this. And
Yeah.
sometimes I think, with those tests, not that he's testing us necessarily, but with tests in general in life, are you going to rely on God to get you through this? Or are you going to say, no, it's your fault and you caused this and you allowed it to happen. So therefore,
Yeah.
you know what? I don't want anything to do with you.
Right.
Well, it's a broken world. It's sinful, so therefore right now it is the devil's. The devil reigns, and until the new earth, new heavens, that's the way it's going to be.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah. I think part of it too is that it's hard for us, and I hear this in Ashton's question and his comment about his friend, is like, we don't want our friends to be atheists, and I get that, but this could be just a part of his spiritual journey.
Right.
And that's really hard
Sure.
to think of too. Like, it feels really hard for someone to say, I don't know that I believe in God, but that's it. The seeking is okay. And the questioning is okay. And the processing through is okay. And even sometimes being like, I think I might be an atheist. That's not wrong or bad, I guess,
Sure.
if you're in this journey of trying to figure out what you believe. And when you're in high school and in college, that's what you're doing. A lot of it is figuring out what you believe.
And if there's like, I don't know if your friend's a reader or not, but there's a book, and I'm not a reader, but I couldn't put this book down, and it's called Takes Too Much Faith to Be an Atheist.
Mm.
And it's a phenomenal book. I think is it Frank Peretti who wrote that
I
one?
love Frank
Yeah,
Peretti.
Frank Peretti's great.
Yeah.
But it's a fantastic book.
Mm.
Long, very long, but it's great.
And I think one thing I would say is like that. I would say that is somehow at times how God does his best work in your life, is not that this bad event is caused or something, but those moments where you're like, forget you, God, screw you, you did this, whatever, I'm done.
Yeah.
But then all of a sudden you're like, okay, now what?
Yeah.
Now how am I doing this on my own? What am I trying to do? That's
Mhm.
where you start asking those questions and
thinking
wrestling
through it,
with
yeah.
that idea of good versus evil, and
Yeah.
talking about, is God causing this or not?
Yeah.
And you start kind of putting in the work. And
Yeah.
sometimes that can be ill-placed, or it's just out of anger, or you're not seeking out good answers, but you're learning throughout that whole process,
Right.
and you're growing somewhere.
Right.
Somehow God is working in that.
The Holy Spirit's still working. And that's the thing. Like, we have to trust that God is working in the midst of that when things are bad too.
And I'm going to say, like, huge shout out to Ashton, because just because you know this means that you're somewhat walking with him.
Yeah.
That's right.
You're in the
Which
journey.
is exactly what we should be doing as Christians.
You got it. That's
So,
that make disciples who make disciples.
What I would say, Ashton, is, you know what, if you don't know the answers to some of those questions, find someone that would, and just have a conversation, so
And
Yeah.
be
walk
with
with
that
them.
person.
Be
Yeah,
with,
walk
be
with
with,
them.
yeah.
Yeah.
Keep being friends. And he says he's looking at people who have been told they're not good enough by parents.
So that's not a God issue. I think that's a parent issue.
Well-
And we're good and human.
Mhm.
Parents are. We make lots of mistakes too. So
Well, and I even think about this. I know our time's almost up, but I think about just even the conversations as your kid gets older. Like, I have two daughters that are 26 and 25. And even just through conversations that I have with them, or me even with my parents,
Yeah.
I'm 46 years old. And just the perception, I know, just the perception of how I perceived things at a certain age was actually completely off base from what actually was reality.
Right.
And so sometimes we can think about these things and about how the words, how they affect us, but maybe that wasn't the intent to begin with.
Yeah.
You know, so.
Yeah.
Well, Les Brown is one of my favorite motivational speakers. And here's a great quote for anybody whose parents or friends tell them they're not good enough is someone's opinion of you does not have to become your reality.
Exactly.
Yep.
Exactly.
And you'll find that all throughout your
All
life.
throughout
Yeah.
your life. Yep. Well, that brings us right to where we need to be.
Well, I want to give a shout out for
Yeah.
this coming Sunday and the next 2 Sundays at FOF, we're actually doing questions you never thought you could ask in church.
In church.
Live.
In church.
Yes,
Hey.
live.
So Dave will be taking live text questions. We'll have the iPad with him and answering anything you have for him. So it's not necessarily in podcast format. It's going to be more just kind of Dave off the cuff talking, but it's one of the, I think, favorites at our church.
Yep.
And we'd love for you guys to be a part of it here.
Yeah, for sure.
It'll be on 21-6 like Sunday, normal Sunday worship.
There we go.
All right, there's the music. So it's time for us to get out here. Hey guys, thanks for everything today.
And remember,
Sunday.
Even you can.
this Sunday, text your questions 815-314-0363.
Have a good week.